Hey guys, tonight we slip into a world of sweet honey, sacred hymns, and a whole lot of buzzing. Imagine this. You wake in the pre-dawn hush, tucked into a straw mattress that creaks if you so much as blink. A single beeswax candle flickers in a stone alcove. Somewhere nearby, the soft chant of matins drifts from the chapel, half-mumbled Latin echoing through ancient walls. You sit up, stretch stiff arms, and remember, today is your first full day as the Abbey's newest beekeeper. You probably will not survive this, not because of the bees, though they are a legitimate threat, but because this world is slow, meticulous, and relentlessly rule-bound. Also, you are wearing 5 layers of wool and linen, and it is June. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, I would love to know where you are tuning in from and what time it is. Drop that in the comments below. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your feet hit the cold stone floor, and you wince. Your toes are already regretting the day. The nuns around you rustle into action like a field of tall grass catching wind, silent and synchronized. You are handed a folded habit, a coarse outer garment, and a small wooden cross on a rope necklace. None of this will help with the bees. That part you will have to learn the hard way. The abbess is a tall woman with the serene gaze of someone who has seen many swarms and survived them all. She nods at you and gestures silently for you to follow. You do, out through the stone cloister, past the garden where onions lean drunkenly on each other, into a smaller courtyard ringed by rose bushes and the faint scent of lavender. Then you hear it, a hum, low, steady, and oddly melodic. You are standing in front of the apiary. There are 6 hives, each a weathered wooden box with slanted roofs and Latin inscriptions burned into the sides. The hives sit on stone slabs, lifted just slightly from the damp earth. Surrounding them are bunches of wild herbs, lemon balm, thyme, and mint, planted not just to nourish the bees, but to keep away pests. And allegedly, the devil, one of the older nuns, Sister Beata, gives you a grin that says, "You're gonna get stung, kid." She motions for you to come closer and hands you a small bundle of smoldering straw in a clay bowl. The smoke drifts lazily upward. The bees, you notice, seem calmer near her, and that is your first lesson. The bees are not your enemies, but they do have rules. The Abbey keeps bees for many reasons. Honey is one of the few reliable sweeteners in a medieval world where sugar is rare and scandalously expensive. More importantly, beeswax burns clean, without odor or soot, a requirement for church candles. Church law forbids tallow candles on the altar, beeswax or bust. And then there is the symbolism. Bees are chaste, pure, industrious. A hive is a natural monastery, a mirror of your own cloistered life. Every bee has a role, a job, a sacrifice. And like you, they serve a queen they will never question. No pressure. You reach toward the hive and immediately yank your hand back as a bee lands on your wrist. Sister Beata chuckles, then shows you how to move. Slow, smooth, predictable. No flailing, no panic. Definitely no shrieking. Historians still argue whether medieval nuns actually had access to the detailed beekeeping manuals written by monks at the time. Works like the Geoponica or De Apibus were often reserved for male eyes. But what you see here is not ignorance. It is lived knowledge, passed hand to hand, bee to bee. Inhale, awkward in your habit, and watch as the sisters inspect the hive. There is a rhythm to it. Tap the roof twice. Whisper a psalm. Ease open the lid. The frames are heavy with wax and honeycomb, golden light trapped in delicate structure. You catch your breath. It is beautiful. You whisper a prayer, not because you are pious. Well, maybe a little, but because you are starting to feel like this is sacred in the realest sense. A communion not of bread and wine, but of pollen and patience. Did you know some convents used to give bees names? Not all of them, of course, just the queens. And some even swore that bees would leave the hives if the abbess died without notice. That was serious business. Bee behavior was considered divine commentary. If your bees abandoned you, you were in big spiritual trouble. You try not to think about that as a few bees crawl onto your shoulder. A nun gently shoos one from your face with a feather. No squashing allowed. Bees are considered sacred creatures, messengers of heaven in some texts. Kill one, and you risk more than a sting. But the abbey's bees are well trained, or at least well acquainted with their human caretakers. They seem to know when the sisters mean business and when they are just checking in. It is a quiet relationship built on scent, movement, and a stubborn kind of patience. You are not stung today. Not yet. But you do get sap on your fingers from the hive's propolis, a sticky resin bees use to seal cracks and sterilize their home. It smells like pine and medicine. Later, you learn that nuns mix it into salves for wounds, a kind of holy glue. You wonder what other secrets are tucked inside this world of wax and wings. As the morning sun begins to rise higher, casting golden light over the stone walls and fluttering habits, you step back from the hive. Your hands are shaking, not from fear exactly, but from the slow creeping understanding that this will not be a hobby. This is a devotion, a vocation within a vocation. And the bees? They are your new sisters too. You are still buzzing from your first hive visit, figuratively, for now. Your fingers are sticky with propolis. Your back is stiff from crouching in that heavy wool, and your thoughts are a whirl of wings and whispered prayers. But there is no time for daydreaming. The bell tolls, a short, clipped sound that means assembly, and off you go, following the flow of black veiled figures through the garden cloister. As you walk, you try to process what just happened. The abbey's bees are more than livestock. They are spiritual companions, sacred workers, and as odd as it sounds, that attitude is not just romantic fluff. You are starting to realize that medieval nuns had a profoundly symbolic relationship with their bees. In the convent's scriptorium, a narrow room lined with wooden benches and a few dusty manuscripts, you are handed an old text to copy by hand. The Latin is patchy. The ink smells faintly metallic, and the handwriting looks like someone was actively being chased by bees while they wrote it. But tucked between lines about fasting and psalm recitations, you find an unexpected note. The bee is most beloved by the Lord, for she gathers without harm, lives in silence, works with humility, and tastes not of carnality. Right, bees, you realize, are not just producers of honey and wax. They are miniature monks with wings. To fully understand why nuns embraced beekeeping, you have to zoom out, back to medieval theology. The church loved metaphors, especially the ones that made hard labor feel like holy labor. Bees were a perfect symbol. They worked tirelessly. They created sweetness from disorder. And crucially, they were thought to reproduce without sexual contact. That last bit is scientifically untrue, but deeply appealing in a society obsessed with chastity. Historians still argue whether most medieval clergy actually believed bees were virginal. Some say it was a symbolic understanding. Others claim it was a literal misconception. Either way, it cemented the bee's role as a model of purity. And in a convent, purity is everything. You sit through a brief lecture from Sister Adela, the convent's de facto theologian, who explains, without cracking a smile, that Saint Bernard of Clairvaux once compared the Virgin Mary to a bee, producing spiritual honey from the flower of divine grace. You do not know what that means exactly, but you are starting to get the vibe. You glance around. The windows are small slits to keep out drafts. Light pours in like melted butter. Dust drifts lazily through the beams. Outside, you hear the droning hum of the hives, constant as breath, and it clicks. Bees are not just tolerated here, they are honored. In fact, entire religious orders had a soft spot for the hive. The Cistercians, for instance, were famously strict, silent meals, endless prayer, but they poured serious energy into beekeeping. Some monasteries even bred different types of bees for specific climates. They built specialized bee walls with niches to protect hives from the cold and rain. Nuns, being no less industrious, often adopted these same practices behind cloistered walls. And although the written records are thinner for female monastics, because, sexism, you get glimpses of their skill in marginal notes, herbals, and accounts of abbey inventories. Beeswax, for example, shows up as a line item in convent budgets, valued alongside embroidered vestments and hand-illuminated psalters. You step out into the cloister again. Sister Beata meets you near the well and places a flat round of beeswax into your hands. It is warm from her apron pocket, smooth and golden as a sunrise. She presses a finger to your lips and leads you back to the hives. This time, you are not just watching, you are working. The sisters chant softly, not a full hymn, more like a murmured loop of a psalm, as they lift the hive lids and check the combs. You learn how to spot brood cells, how to tell old wax from fresh, how to listen to the tone of the buzzing. Angry buzz? Back off. Steady buzz? You are good. Beata tells you quietly, with a conspiratorial glance, that the bees recognize voices. She insists they can even tell the difference between a novice and a seasoned nun. You want to laugh, but part of you believes her. These bees do seem strangely calm, when she is near. She moves like she belongs among them. You, on the other hand, move like someone trying not to step on a squeaky toy in church. A bee lands on your eyelid. You freeze. No flailing. No shrieking. Just breathe. Beata gently brushes it away with a strip of linen. You exhale like you just avoided excommunication. Did you know some convents reportedly prayed over their hives during hard seasons? Bees were seen as divine gifts, and their distress could feel like spiritual judgment. If honey production dropped or a colony died, the sisters might blame unconfessed sin, improper chanting, or even a cursed visitor. And yes, one text from a 14th century abbess mentions a nun with a sour face, driving the bees into melancholy. Imagine getting written up in your heavenly report card for bee vibes. You kneel beside a hive and watch the worker bees trundle out on tiny legs, carrying pollen dust like yellow pom-poms. Their determination is absurd. These bees will work themselves to death within a few weeks. And their reward? Nothing. No vacation. Just the satisfaction of keeping the queen alive and the hive running. Sound familiar? You start to see why the sisters loved them. In a world where women's work was often invisible, the hive offered something else. Proof of labor. Proof that patience, order, and discipline could build something golden, something fragrant, something holy, and still no stings. Maybe they like you after all, or maybe it is beginner's luck. Either way, you are starting to feel it. The rhythm, the reverence, the weird little thrill of handling hundreds of stinger-wielding insects and walking away intact. You step back as the morning ends, the sun now high and warm on the back of your neck. The sisters hum a final note. The lids go back on, and just like that, the apiary is still again. You press your wax disc into your palm and smile. You may not know all the prayers yet. You may still flinch at every bee near your nose. But today, you are part of something ancient and strange and beautiful, and you did not scream once. Well done. The next morning greets you with a throbbing shoulder and a faint buzz in your ears, not from any sting, but from yesterday's adrenaline still echoing in your bones. You shuffle into your boots and out into the chill courtyard. Mist hovers low over the grass. Somewhere in the distance, the roosters begin to lose their collective minds. You are summoned to the herbarium today, not because you have done anything wrong, though you accidentally dropped your wax disc into the well last night, but because the sisters believe if you are going to care for bees, you must also understand the flowers that feed them. You nod solemnly, then sneeze 3 times in rapid succession. Pollen season has arrived. The convent's herb garden is a symphony of greens and purples, all neatly squared off into raised beds bordered by river stones. Lavender spills out like sleepy fountains. Sage leaves shimmer with dew. Marigolds blink orange in the morning light. Everything here has a purpose, if not culinary, then medicinal or spiritual. Sister Morenti, who speaks in riddles and smells faintly of vinegar, waves you over with a fistful of rosemary. She explains with great patience and the occasional elbow to your ribs that nuns did not just plant flowers for beauty. These were bee-attracting herbs, strategically chosen to nourish the hives and repel pests. This section of the convent is where faith meets botany with surgical precision. Take borage, for example. Its star-shaped blue flowers are like a neon sign for bees. The sisters believe it gives the bees courage, maybe because of the plant's association with bravery in battle, or maybe because it just looks like it belongs in a fairy tale. Either way, you are told to water it daily. You learn that bees have favorite flowers, just like people have favorite snacks. Comfrey, marjoram, thyme. Each one blooms at different points in the year, ensuring a steady buffet. The sisters rotate plantings like clockwork, watching the skies, the soil, the subtle rhythm of wings over petals. Historians still argue whether medieval convents actively designed their gardens with pollination cycles in mind, or if it was happy accident born of necessity. But after a few hours spent over a patch of chamomile, you start to suspect they knew exactly what they were doing. You pause to wipe your brow and see a bee hovering near your elbow. It lands on a daisy, wiggles its fuzzy legs, and dives face first into pollen like it is clocking in for the day. You cannot help but grin. These tiny workers live such short, focused lives, no midlife crises, no existential dread. Just bloom, buzz, repeat. Sister Morenti hands you a small pouch of dried petals and a strip of parchment. You are told to scatter the petals along the hive bases and write a blessing in Latin. Your Latin is not great, but you write something resembling a psalm and hope the bees are not fluent. This practice is old, possibly ancient. The blessing of bees was once part of certain Christian rituals, especially near the feast of Saint Ambrose, patron saint of beekeepers. Naturally, legend says he was visited by bees in his cradle, which is both charming and a little terrifying. One medieval abbey even had a carved wooden baby with bees crawling all over its face to commemorate the event. You wonder who pitched that statue idea. Probably someone who had never met an actual bee. In the far corner of the garden is the shaded grove known as the Bee Chapel. There is no altar, just a weathered wooden bench and a small stone plaque with a cross carved into it. Wildflowers bloom around its base. You are told this is where the nuns come to speak to the bees. It sounds odd until you learn that speaking to bees was a widespread custom. In many parts of Europe, it was believed that bees must be informed of all major events in the household: deaths, births, marriages. Otherwise, they might grow restless, or worse, abandon the hive entirely. Some nuns reportedly whispered news of the abbess's health or sang psalms to their hives before bedtime. So now, here you are, talking to a hive. You feel ridiculous. Good morning. No one has died. The soup was fine last night. Amen. You wait. A single bee emerges, does a lazy loop around your head, and disappears into the clover. You decide to take that as a good sign. Later in the kitchen, you help prepare what the sisters call bee cakes, small discs of honey-soaked bread, sometimes left near the hives during lean seasons, not for the bees to eat, but as offerings. Gratitude in carbohydrate form. You place yours on a flat stone mutter something vaguely respectful, and step back. By the way, did you know medieval nuns sometimes used honey in their ink? Yep, honey helped prevent mold in manuscript pigments, especially in humid climates. You think about that as you stir a pot of honey-sweetened porridge for the evening meal. You are beginning to suspect there is nothing these women cannot do with a beehive. You close out the day kneeling again at the edge of the herb garden, bees drowsily floating through the golden light. You breathe in the scent of mint and lemon balm, your robes damp with earth and sweat. You have learned the flowers. You have blessed the hive. You have spoken to bees, baked for bees, and so far remained mostly unstung. You are not a nun yet, not really, but you are beginning to feel part of the hive. Your next task comes not with a whispered assignment or a knowing nudge from Sister Morenti, but with a clang, specifically the sharp, unmistakable sound of a metal tool hitting stone. You wince. It is not a bell this time, but the forge bellows near the apiary wall. You did not realize the convent even had a forge. Apparently, you are about to learn that beekeeping in the Middle Ages involved a surprising amount of hardware. You are handed a linen apron and escorted to what the sisters call the wax room. The name is misleading. It smells like a battlefield fought entirely with candles and burned herbs. The air is heavy and warm, full of the sour, sweet scent of scorched honeycomb. Several large cauldrons bubble ominously. You instantly regret wearing sleeves. Today, it is all about tools. Beekeeping without getting stung is not just about prayer and petal offerings. It is logistics, materials, cleverness. You learn how the sisters used smoke to calm the bees, not just by waving around bundles of burning sage, though they do that too, but with elaborate smoker pots made of clay and brass. Some look like incense burners gone rogue. Others are shaped like fat snails with chimney spouts. You hold one up. It is heavier than expected, scorched black from years of use. Sister Clements, who has not said more than 12 words to you so far, explains that smoke disrupts bee communication. Their alarm pheromones become scrambled, and they retreat deeper into the hive. You nod, trying not to think about how your own alarm pheromones are probably going haywire just holding this thing. Historians still argue whether nuns designed their own custom beekeeping gear or simply borrowed tools from laymen and monks. Some records suggest they were inventive, even repurposing liturgical objects, thuribles for instance, as early smoke tools. Others say they relied on trade networks for the trickier pieces, bartering honey and wax for forged iron implements. Either way, these women were not improvising with sticks and wishful thinking. They had gear. You move to a wooden table where frames of wax comb are being scraped clean. This is where the hive waste, old wax, propolis, the occasional unfortunate bee part, is collected. It is not discarded. Oh no, every crumb is useful. The sisters melt the wax down, filter it through fine linen, and pour it into molds carved with tiny crosses and floral patterns. These wax blocks will be used for everything from candle making to seal stamping to waterproofing their boots. You are not kidding. Beeswax was a medieval miracle product. Think coconut oil levels of versatility, but with more theology. You are given a knife with a bone handle and shown how to trim berkum. The knife is old, stained dark, and slightly wobbly. You grip it too hard and nearly gouge your own thumb. Sister Clemence watches silently, then gently corrects your grip. You are learning, slowly. And then there is the veil. You have seen it before, worn by the more senior beekeepers. It is not what you imagined, not the puffy astronaut mesh you see today. This is a coarse linen hood with slits for vision, layered with finely woven horsehair, netting stitched to the inner brim. It ties under the chin and makes you look like a disheveled knight in mourning. But it works. Barely. The nuns crafted these veils themselves, usually from scraps of worn-out habits and bits of curtain lace. The goal was not visibility, it was barrier. You test one and immediately understand why some sisters still preferred to go barefaced with only a prayer and a steady hand. Still, you are grateful for it when Sister Clemence leads you to your next lesson, hive relocation. Turns out, not all hives stay put. Sometimes the nuns needed to move them due to flooding, cold drafts, aggressive ants, or just overly ambitious roosters knocking them over. You are tasked with helping shift a hive 3 meters to the left into a new stone base carved with a shallow groove. A bee moat, Clemence explains. It is to keep out crawling pests. You nod. You are sweating. First smoke, then gentle loosening. You use long hook-tipped iron tools to lift the straw skep, a domed hive made from coiled rye straw and daubed in clay. It is heavier than it looks. Inside, tens of thousands of bees are doing their business as usual. One climbs over the rim and pauses on your glove. You pause too, no flinching. Together, with the grace of people handling a basket full of explosives, you and Clemence lower the skep onto the newsstand. You did it. No screaming, no stings, a record. But just as you start to celebrate internally, you hear a sound that makes your blood turn to broth, a buzzing roar, louder than usual. The sisters stop what they're doing. All eyes turn to the tree line. You follow their gaze. A swarm. This is not a disaster yet. Bees swarm when they are searching for a new queen or a better home. It is natural, even healthy, but a swarm can mean chaos if it lands somewhere stupid, like the bishop's chambers, or the abbess's hood, or your face. The nuns spring into action. They grab baskets, bells, and curiously, a frying pan. You are handed a wooden ladle and told to bang it loudly. Apparently, the clanging mimics thunder and encourages the bees to cluster instead of scatter. You are skeptical, but you do it. The swarm spins, a golden cyclone against the afternoon sun, then settles miraculously on the lowest branch of an apple tree. Sister Clemence nods. You run to fetch the swarm basket, a wide, flat skep with an open base and a linen cover. The branch is cut. The basket is pressed upward. The swarm slides in like sand through fingers. It is over in minutes. You are shaking, but again, no stings. That night, your hands still smell of smoke and wax. You lie in your cot staring at the rafters, thinking about tools and thunder. and the sheer absurdity of playing percussion for insects. The convent is quiet. Even the bees seem to sleep. You survived hive relocation. You saw a swarm. You banged a pan and lived to tell the tale. You are, against all odds, becoming a beekeeper. The next morning opens with a chorus of creaking joints and the soft rustle of habits brushing past stone walls. You wake with wax in your fingernails and the faint scent of lavender clinging to your tunic. Today, Sister Felicitas summons you before breakfast. That usually means one of two things. Someone has died, or someone has decided it's time you learn about queen bees. Thankfully, it is the latter. You are escorted into the apiaries' shaded south wing, an area reserved for more delicate hive operations. There, beneath a small wooden overhang, is the observation hive. Not medieval high-tech, exactly, but ingenious all the same. The nuns cut slits into a thick block of glass, set behind wooden shutters, allowing them to peek into the hive without disturbing the colony. It is like a bee puppet show, minus the puppets. And there, right there, is your first queen. She is slightly longer than the others, with a golden tapering abdomen and a kind of lazy, commanding crawl. Around her, workers hustle, fuss, fan, and feed her like she is the most delicate porcelain doll in the convent. She does not rule with aggression, but with pheromones. Her scent is the law, and everyone obeys. You are fascinated. It turns out, managing queens was one of the most subtle and sensitive tasks medieval nuns undertook. If the queen died or failed to produce, the entire hive could collapse. So the sisters developed systems for monitoring her health by scent, behavior, even sound. Some claimed they could hear a difference in the hive's hum when the queen was unwell. That is the kind of thing you can only learn through obsessive attention and maybe a sprinkle of divine intuition. Now you are handed a beeswax tablet, not for scribbling notes, but for scent imprinting. Sister Felicitas shows you how to warm it slightly, then gently press it near the queen's trail. The scent can later be used to help guide a new colony, or even coax bees into accepting a new queen. Historians still argue whether such scent transfer rituals were backed by scientific understanding or closer to spiritual mimicry. Some scholars point to records suggesting nuns anointed replacement queens with sacred oil, thinking it might convince the colony she was divinely chosen. Others argue this was a poetic metaphor lost in translation. Either way, it worked often enough to keep the hives alive. You lean closer, watching the workers feed the queen with their own mouths. Royal jelly, Sister Felicitas whispers, a creamy substance that turns an ordinary larva into a queen. Only larvae fed this for the first few days will develop the needed organs and behaviors. It is the original makeover montage, except it is mostly drool. You learn that when a hive decides it needs a new queen, usually because the old one is dying, missing, or just underperforming, it begins the process of creating a queen cell, a wax cradle built vertically like a teardrop, in which a single larva is raised like royalty. The workers choose who gets the jelly, who gets the throne. Democracy by mouth. Sometimes, if more than one queen hatches, they fight. You blink. You had not thought bees had it in them. But yes, queen battles are very real and not metaphorical. 2 queens in one hive is 1 queen too many. They sting each other until only one survives. It is brutal. It is efficient. It is probably something that inspired 3 or 4 Shakespearean tragedies. To prevent this drama, the nuns intervene. You watch as the sisters carefully remove extra queen cells from one of the hives. They are placed into tiny straw containers and set aside. If a hive later loses its queen, these spares can be introduced gently, slowly, and always under supervision. You are taught to place the new queen in a tiny cage within the hive with a plug of honey or wax. The workers nibble through it over time, getting used to her smell, accepting her as one of their own, hopefully. You think about that kind of patience, introducing change slowly with sugar, not force. There's a story Sister Felicitas tells over lunch, with half a loaf of barley bread and a wry smile. Once, a queen escaped during a festival and landed in the bishop's wine goblet. The sisters fished her out and nursed her back to health with warmed honey drops and psalms. She survived. The bishop did not notice. That queen went on to lay for another 2 summers. Whether it is true or not, no one dares question it. And speaking of laying, did you know that a queen can lay over 1,000 eggs per day at her peak? That is 1 egg every 45 seconds. You try to imagine doing anything productive every 45 seconds, let alone producing a kingdom. You feel appropriately humble. You are handed a tiny wax scroll and told to record today's queen observations, not with ink, but with an etching stylus. The scroll is smoothed over with a warm spoon afterward, ready for reuse. It is like a whiteboard, but made from honeycomb and prayer. You are not just watching bees anymore. You are reading them, their body language, their fanning wings, the strange vibration dances they perform on a comb. You learn to spot a nervous buzz, an aggressive dart, a contented waggle, and that, Sister Felicitas says, is the difference between tending bees and serving them. You begin to understand why some nuns believed the queen was a metaphor for Mary, motherly, central, untouchable, yet totally vital. Others thought the queen represented Christ himself, feeding his flock and uniting the body. Historians still argue about the depth of these metaphors, but in the cloister, theology is in the eye of the beholder or the beekeeper. As evening sets in, you kneel by the observation hive once more. The queen is still there, surrounded, protected, honored. You wonder if she knows how much work is done for her sake. How many prayers are whispered over her? How many baskets are prepared? How many tools cleaned? How many veils sewn? Probably not. She is just a bee, but you are not, and you are beginning to see what it means to hold a kingdom together. The storm begins before sunrise. You are jolted awake by thunder that sounds like a cartload of barrels tumbling down the convent stairs. Rain hammers the roof, turning the courtyard into a shallow pond and the pathways into syrupy sludge. You pull your cloak tight and shuffle toward the apiary, ankle deep in medieval misery, dreading what the morning will bring. Beehives and storms do not mix well. By the time you arrive, Several skeps have been covered in oilcloth, tied down with ropes, and reinforced with hastily arranged stones. The bees inside are restless. You can hear them, a deep, vibrating growl from within the straw walls. This is not a good day to open a hive. So naturally, that is exactly what you are going to do. Sister Teresia appears with a large umbrella and a very determined expression. Today, you learn about inspections, those regular hive checks the nuns perform, rain or shine, to prevent catastrophe. The bees may not like it, but nature waits for no prayer, and neither do mites. You follow Teresia to a hive showing signs of trouble. The entrance is sticky, the workers sluggish, and the usual defensive buzz is absent. Inside, things are worse. The comb is sagging. Some brood cells are uncapped prematurely. And worst of all, there are wax moth larvae, tiny pale invaders, chewing through the hive like it is an all-you-can-eat buffet. This is the kind of inspection the nuns dread and excel at. With calm precision, Teresia begins removing the compromised comb. The wax is scraped into a slop bucket. The frame is singed with a heated iron, and the skep is left open to dry. You help, trying not to retch at the smell of rotting brood. This, too, is beekeeping. Historians still argue whether medieval nuns fully understood parasite behavior or simply responded to symptoms. Some records suggest a surprising level of detail in their notes. Descriptions of bee lice, chalk brood, and even colony collapse. Others believe much of it was intuition, observation layered with spiritual interpretation. You learn one phrase quickly: the hives must breathe. Ventilation, you are told, is everything. Many early hives were designed without proper airflow, which made them breeding grounds for mold, mites, and disaster. The nuns innovated. They drilled tiny pinholes into their straw skeps, lifted them on raised bases, and even experimented with stacking skep tiers for better circulation, something that made the bees grumpy, but less dead. There is an old stone near the compost heap engraved with a Latin phrase, apes non tollant vitorum. Bees will not abide rot. You repeat it under your breath as you rinse your gloves. By midday, the rain eases, and the air thickens with steam. The smell of damp wax and crushed herbs clings to your skin. Teresia hands you a small cloth bundle. Inside, a herbal fumigant mixture: thyme, sage, and marjoram, all dried and crumbled, used to cleanse hives with gentle smoke. Not every inspection ends in trauma. Sometimes it is just aromatherapy and a few stern glances. The nuns rotate inspections on a strict schedule. Every hive gets checked twice a month, more often in spring and fall. The logbooks are updated after each visit, not in full prose, but with wax-sealed symbols, spirals for swarming behavior, triangles for mite signs, and tiny crosses for blessings invoked. You are invited to make your first entry today. You hesitate. Your hands are still sticky with honey, dirt, and something you really hope is propolis. But you press the spiral seal into the page, feeling oddly official. Then, it happens. A sudden shout from the west field sends everyone sprinting. One of the newer hives, one of your hives, has toppled. You reach it breathless, heart pounding. The skep lies on its side, cracked. Bees spill out in a confused cloud. Someone screams, a blur of linen and wings. But then, silence. You move carefully, smoke pot in hand, veil down, gloves up. Teresia kneels beside you, murmuring Psalm 121 under her breath. He will not suffer thy foot to be moved. You are not sure who she is praying for, the bees or you. Together, you lift the skep and find the comb largely intact. The bees are agitated but not aggressive. No stings. You work quickly, placing them into a spare hive base, guiding the queen, miraculously unharmed, with a feather into her new home. The colony follows, as if magnetized by her scent, by some combination of luck, skill, and perhaps divine intervention. The crisis is averted. You exhale for the first time in minutes. Later, Sister Teresia tells you about the old rituals. When a hive was lost in the past, whether by weather, disease, or misfortune, the nuns held mourning ceremonies. They covered the hives in black cloth and sang requiems. Some claimed it helped the remaining colonies stay calm. Others said it was for the humans, to remind them that bees were not livestock, but neighbors. You wonder what that makes you. A neighbor? A steward? A tiny part of a larger choir? As you finish your final tasks for the day, scraping mud from the skep bases, retying the waterproof covers, you spot something odd. A circle of bees standing still on the stone path, not crawling, not working, just still. You kneel. They are surrounding a dead drone. You did not know bees did that. The moment passes, and they scatter, but you remember it. And later, as you write the day's inspection notes, you add a new symbol, a circle. Not official, not standard, just something you want to remember. The hives have breathed, the storm has passed, and you have earned your place in the log. By now, your mornings begin with a familiar buzz, not just from the hives, but in your chest. It is the sort of quiet anticipation that turns chores into rituals. You no longer flinch when a bee lands on your sleeve. You nod, greeting them like neighbors, well-dressed neighbors in pollen pants. Today's focus is honey, not just collecting it, but understanding the bizarre, sticky alchemy that transforms floral nectar into medieval liquid gold. And spoiler alert, it is way weirder than you expect. The sisters call it the drawing of sweetness. You follow them into the honey chamber, a low-ceilinged room lined with wooden racks and clay jars. It smells like warm beeswax and something faintly citrusy. There are no fancy centrifuges here, just gravity, knives, strainers, and a rhythm that has not changed for centuries. You start by unsealing the comb, using a blunt blade heated over a candle. You slice the wax cappings off each cell. They fall in soft curls, like golden petals, into a basin below. The uncapped comb is then placed upright in a sloped trough, angled to allow the honey to drip naturally into a waiting bowl. It is slow, messy, and mesmerizing. One of the older nuns, Sister Apollonia, tells you that the first honey of the season is always the brightest. The bees have missed the flowers, she says, so they drink them more greedily. You try not to picture a bee chugging a daffodil like a soda. Historians still argue whether medieval methods produced purer honey or simply left more pollen residue. Some insist that cold extracted honey, drawn without pressure, retained more of its healing enzymes. Others argue it was just a matter of necessity. No one had the muscle or technology to do it differently. Either way, what you taste when Sister Apollonia lets you dip your finger in the bowl is unlike anything you have ever tried. It tastes like wildflowers and wormwood and sunlight. Somehow, sunlight. But honey is more than dessert in this convent. It is currency. It sweetens the sisters' porridge, glazes their tarts, and fills the offering bowls at feast days. When the bishop visits, he leaves not with coins, but with jars of honey sealed in linen and blessed with a psalm. Some monasteries even traded it for parchment or salt. This is not just food, it is power, and it must be guarded. Which brings you to the honey thieves. Every summer, rumors swirl like smoke. Someone, usually a lay servant or an overconfident apprentice, sneaks into the honey room at night, hoping to snatch a jar. It never ends well, not because they get caught by nuns, but because they get caught by bees. The sisters leave a few open combs near the windows, bait for would-be robbers. The bees defend it with unholy zeal. One such thief, legend says, was chased from the convent entirely, naked, stung from crown to heel. He fled to a nearby forest and joined a group of hermits who subsisted entirely on mushrooms and regret. The lesson? Do not steal honey from nuns or bees. Once the honey has been collected, the real work begins. Preservation. You are taught to filter it through layers of linen stretched taut across clay jugs. This removes impurities, bee legs, pollen chunks, bits of wax. The filtered honey is then sealed with wax, corked with a twig, and stored in the cool cellar. Some is mixed with vinegar to make oxymel, a syrup used to treat sore throats and melancholy. Other batches are infused with herbs, lavender, rose, thyme, to suit both culinary and medicinal purposes. But perhaps the strangest concoction is honey wine, also called mead. In the corner of the apiary cellar, a few dusty barrels wait quietly. Mead is not exactly encouraged. It is alcohol, after all. But the sisters argue that it serves medicinal purposes, and also that it is delicious. You are given a thimbleful to taste, and yes, it is divine. It tastes like poetry feels. There is a debate recorded in one of the convent's annals about whether excessive mead tasting was the cause of a sudden spell of ecstatic dancing during a Michaelmas celebration. Historians still argue whether this was religious fervor fermented miscalculation or an unfortunately timed wasp infestation. The nuns do not confirm or deny. They just smirk. Once the honey room is cleaned, wax and cappings are melted down into candles. You help stir the pot, the wax swirling like gold soup. Candles are poured using reed molds or dipped repeatedly until they reach the right thickness. The finished ones are polished with wool cloth, wrapped in linen, and stored in cedar boxes to repel moths. You notice that each candle bears a mark, either a cross or a flower pressed into the base. These are not decorative, They designate purpose. A cross means the candle is for prayer or funerals. A flower means daily use. A star? High feast day only. So yes, even the candles have a liturgical calendar. You end the day by helping label the honey jars. No printed stickers, of course. Just tiny parchment tags tied with thread, inscribed with the hive's name and the harvest date. Hive names, you ask? Oh yes. Every hive has a name. Some are biblical: Judith, Ruth, Esther. Others are less so. One is simply called the Screamer. You do not ask. You find yourself humming as you work. Not a hymn, just a tune. The same one the bees hum when they fan the hive entrances. It is not quite a song, not quite silence. It is just enough. As the sun sinks low, Sister Apollonia gives you a parting gift, a thumb-sized wax charm shaped like a bee, worn on a leather string. It is not for good luck, she says. It is to remind you that sweetness comes from work and from knowing when to sting. You smile, and you hang it next to your bed. The air is thick with late summer pollen, the kind that turns your sleeves yellow with a single brush against a hedge. You wake to the muffled thrum of wings, already hard at work. The hives are humming like monks in procession, steady, devout, and just a bit moody. Today, the nuns are preparing for something sacred. It is time to split a colony. No, not destroy it. Divide it, gently, like slicing a loaf of warm bread, and trusting each half will rise again. This is how the nuns expand their apiary, not by purchasing bees, impossible, and frankly frowned upon, but by encouraging colonies to grow so robust that they must be gently pulled apart before they do it themselves, through swarming. And swarming? That is the bee equivalent of a flash mob breaking out on your balcony. You start by inspecting the most populous hive. You approach carefully. Too many bees clumped at the entrance, flying in tight zigzags, can mean the colony is on edge. But today, things seem calm, a good sign. Inside, combs overflow with capped brood, honey, and fresh nectar. You spot queen cells near the lower edges of the frames, small waxy teardrops pointing downward like secret bunkers. This is where new queens are born. Historians still argue whether medieval apiarists fully understood queen rearing or simply noticed the patterns. Large, healthy colonies produce these cells, and within days, they erupt into full-on royal drama. Only one queen will survive the fight for the throne. The rest? Let's just say Game of Thrones had nothing on bees. The nuns, however, do not wait for bloodshed. Sister Loretta, the quiet one with arms like sculpted yew branches, shows you how to gently remove a queen cell and place it into a smaller skep, along with a few frames of bees, honey, and capped brood. This is the nucleus, a baby hive. You are building a new home, a bee starter kit. The goal? That the virgin queen will hatch, mate, and begin her own dynasty. But here is the catch. She must leave to do so. Once the cell hatches, the young queen must take a mating flight, a dangerous, high-stakes excursion where she'll seek out drones from other colonies. She will mate mid-air with a dozen or more, then return to her hive, ready to lay up to 2,000 eggs per day. And if she does not return, you start over. You help secure the nucleus hive in a shaded corner of the garden. It sits on a wooden platform lined with mint and lemon balm, natural bee sedatives. Apparently, you whisper a small blessing over the queen cell, because even if you are not sure you believe in divine intercession, you have seen what happens when a queen fails. And it is not peaceful. The splitting ritual includes a peculiar step, telling the mother. The nuns visit the original hive and speak softly to the old queen, informing her that her legacy continues, that she is honored. It sounds silly until you do it, and the bees, calmer than ever, seem to approve. Later that afternoon, you help with a swarm trap, a woven basket hung from a tree limb, baited with beeswax and crushed lemongrass. These traps are part insurance policy, part wishful thinking. If a rogue swarm emerges, you want it landing where you can reach it, not inside the bishop's bell tower again. That did not go well. Some fringe sources suggest that medieval nuns used holy relics, splinters of saints' bones, or blessed metals, placed near swarm traps to inspire obedience. Others think it was just superstition layered over careful practice. Historians still argue whether it worked, or if the bees were simply drawn to the beeswax, as they always are. You take a moment to rest by the lavender hedges, watching the returning foragers land, with legs swollen in gold dust. The sound they make is different now, less frantic, more resolute. You are starting to recognize moods in the hum. Is that normal? Probably not, but no one else seems alarmed. While resting, you ask Sister Loretta how she learned all this. She shrugs and gestures at the hives. They taught me, she says. I just listened. You think about how much has changed since you first arrived. You have not been stung in days. You move with more certainty. Even your dreams hum with the rhythm of wings. You have become fluent in something ancient and wordless. Even so, the process is not always perfect. One nucleus hive fails. The queen cell hatches, but the queen disappears during her flight. You wait days, then check again. No eggs, no buzz of activity, just a few workers listlessly cleaning empty cells. The hive must be combined back into a larger colony, an act the nuns call reconciliation. It is delicate work. Combining two hives requires a scent barrier, usually a thin sheet of parchment brushed with lavender oil and honey, placed between the two colonies. Over a few days, the bees chew through the barrier, gradually mingling scents until they accept each other as kin. If you rush it, carnage. You perform the ritual with nervous fingers, but it works. The bees settle. Harmony is restored. At supper, the sisters chant softly, and you realize the melody matches the pattern of wing beats in the hive when it is calm. You do not know if that is coincidence or deep design, maybe both. Before bed, you check on the remaining split. The queen cell is intact, but the buzz inside is electric. Something is coming. You lean in, close your eyes, and swear you can feel the anticipation, and maybe something else. Hope. You wake before the bells. It is still gray outside. The world paused in that sleepy space between night and light. But inside your chest, Thunder. Today is the day. The queen is hatching. You rush to the nucleus hive. Quietly, of course. No need to wake the entire convent. You kneel beside it, ears tuned like a radio dial. You do not hear the hatch, not exactly, but you feel the shift. The workers, once meandering, now move with clear intent, pivoting toward the queen cell like petals turning toward sun. And then you see her. She is longer than the others, her abdomen almost regal in its shimmer. She moves awkwardly at first, like a baby deer in high heels, but quickly finds her rhythm. The workers part for her, forming a living carpet. You are witnessing the beginning of a reign. The nuns call it the procession of approval. The queen marches, inspecting combs, tasting wax, letting the colony learn her scent. It is subtle, but sacred. If they reject her, well, you will not speak of that now. Let us enjoy this for what it is. A small miracle. Sister Loretta arrives behind you, nods once. She is strong, she says, and she has teeth. You blink. Bees do not have teeth, but okay. Poetic license. Loretta means she has presence, command, potential. Now comes the most perilous phase, the mating flight. Within 3 days, this virgin queen must leave the safety of her hive, ascend into the warm sky, and find the drone congregation area, a sort of airborne singles mixer where male bees from nearby colonies gather to, well, contribute. Historians still argue whether medieval beekeepers understood the full scope of this behavior. The term drone congregation area did not appear until centuries later, but convent records mention heavenly spirals and wedding clouds, suggesting the nuns had observed the sky swirling masses of drones and put 2 and 2 together. You watch as the queen prepares. She tests her wings with a few short buzzes. Then, without warning, she launches, not in a straight line, but in loops and arcs, as if writing her name on the sky. You follow her until she vanishes above the treetops. The hive quiets. Now you wait. You do not realize how tightly you have been holding your breath until your stomach growls. So you eat. You sit. You help polish more wax charms. But your mind is still in the air, chasing her. Will she return? Sometimes. They do not. Crows. Storms. Disorientation. A queen's first flight is fraught with risk. Even mating carries danger. Drones die immediately after, and a queen too exhausted may not survive the return trip. Sister Apollonia tells a grim tale of a queen who crash-landed in a puddle and drowned, died crowned and clueless. She adds with a shrug, by sunset, still no sign. Your chest aches with that specific dread you only feel when something sacred is just slightly overdue. Then movement, a swirl of guards at the entrance, a change in pitch. You rush to the hive, and there she is, dirty, wings trembling, but home. The queen returns like a comet streaking earthward. The workers immediately surround her, grooming her, feeding her. She made it. The nuns do not celebrate loudly, but there are smiles, tiny ones. Sister Loretta presses a honeycomb sliver into your palm. To the bride, she says, It tastes like triumph. Within days, she begins laying. Eggs appear in tidy rows, each centered perfectly in its cell. This is how you know the colony has accepted her. She is no longer a visitor. She is mother, monarch, machine. Now the nucleus hive truly becomes a colony. You notice something peculiar as the days pass. The bees around this new queen seem jazzier. Is that a thing? Jazz bees? Probably not, but their dances are more enthusiastic. They're foraging more focused. Perhaps that is the queen's influence. Perhaps it is just timing, but it feels real. And then there is the matter of naming her. The nuns take naming very seriously. Each queen must be named by someone who watched her hatch, who saw her fly. They say the name becomes part of the colony's rhythm, woven into the hum. You are handed the responsibility. You think hard. It cannot be something flippant. Bootsalina is out. Regina feels too obvious. You settle on something older. Meliora, Latin for better things. Sister Loretta nods in approval. She sounds like a prayer. So Meliora reigns. Under her guidance, the new hive flourishes. The bees expand into fresh comb, begin storing nectar and pollen, and even produce wax more freely. You witness the beginning of order, of community. It is like watching a city rise. But with the rise comes the need to defend. A few days later, while inspecting Meliora's hive, you hear it, a sharp pitch, slightly off from the usual hum. It is an intruder. Wasps. They hover at the edge of the hive, darting like knives. The bees respond fast, forming a guard line, flexing their abdomens, flaring wings. The nuns once lost an entire colony to wasps, and the story is still told with shudders. You want to help, but there is little you can do. Sister Apollonia hands you a smudge pot, burning sage and thyme. You place it near the hive. The scent seems to disorient the invaders. A few wasps fall back. The bees handle the rest. That night, you check Meliora's hive again. She is safe. You breathe. As you return to your cell, a thought hits you. This queen, this hive, owes its life to 1,000 small actions, to delicate splits, to patience, to you, standing outside at dawn with a thimble of honey and more hope than skill. And maybe, just maybe, you owe your own calm to them. The sun rises low and warm, casting long shadows across the convent garden. You find yourself drawn back to the apiary, the hive's familiar hum now, a balm instead of a mystery. The rhythm of beekeeping has settled into your bones, like a slow, soothing chant. Today is the day you learn how medieval nuns harvested honey without turning the garden into a battlefield. You might imagine that gathering honey means shoving a smoker in the hive and ripping open the comb with reckless abandon, like a kid smashing a birthday cake. But no, the sisters had finesse. Beekeeping was a prayerful art, balancing respect for the bees and the need for sweetness. They used skeps, those famous straw baskets that look like upside-down hats, to house their bees. Skeps were fragile and, importantly, not removable. So to harvest honey, they had to work around the limits of the container. You watch as Sister Beatrice prepares her tools, a simple curved knife called a bee knife, and a smoker, a clay pot filled with damp moss and herbs. The smoke is the key. It calms the bees, making them less likely to sting. The sisters preferred herbs like lavender or rosemary, which gave the smoke a soothing aroma. You inhale the scent. It's oddly comforting, a mix of earth and sun-warmed leaves. Historians still argue whether medieval beekeepers fully understood why smoke worked or just accepted it as a magical given. Some think the smoke masks the alarm pheromones bees release when disturbed. Others claim the smoke triggers a feeding response, making bees gorge on honey and too lethargic to defend. You edge closer as Sister Beatrice lights the smoker and puffs gentle clouds over the scap. The bees slow their movement, a temporary truce in the ongoing negotiation between human and insect. Next comes the delicate part, cutting the honeycomb without destroying the colony. Remember, these scaps have no removable frames, so the honeycombs are built inside, glued firmly to the straw. You cannot just lift out a tray. Instead, you carefully cut honey-filled combs from the edges, leaving enough brood and honey intact for the bees to keep living and thriving. It is slow work, demanding patience and a steady hand. You feel the buzz thick around your face, but the smoke and Sister Beatrice's calm presence keep you safe. A sting would be an instant wake-up call you do not want. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some sources suggest that nuns sometimes used gloves made from soft deerskin or treated leather. That seems like common sense now, but imagine how novel it must have been in a time when bare hands were the norm and bees were seen as tiny warriors. The honey you harvest is precious, golden, and fragrant. It is never wasted. Some is used to sweeten mead or bread. Other portions go into medicinal balms or as an offering at Mass. Honey was also a key ingredient in remedies for wounds and coughs, valued for its antiseptic qualities long before antibiotics. You watch the comb drip into wooden bowls, sticky fingers coaxing every drop. It feels sacred, like liquid sunlight. The nuns believed honey symbolized divine sweetness, a taste of heaven itself. Yet, harvesting was never without risk. If you took too much honey, the colony could starve in winter. If you disturbed them too often, they might abandon the hive or become aggressive. So beekeeping required balance between taking and giving, between human need and insect survival. You remember the curious medieval practice of bee blessing, where nuns would process around the hives, chanting prayers and sprinkling holy water. Was it spiritual, practical, or both? Historians still argue whether this was a true ritual of protection or a superstition layered on centuries of care. Later, you help pour some honey into small pots, labeling them with delicate calligraphy from the gardens of St. Agnes's convent. You can almost see these jars traveling to market or gifting neighbors, the taste of beekeeping carried in glass. The day ends with the sweet smell of beeswax candles burning in the chapel, a reminder that every part of the bees' work was woven into daily life: light, medicine, food, and faith. You realize the nuns managed not just bees, but a living partnership, a dance of trust and patience. And through it all, you have survived your first honey harvest, sting-free, sticky, and a little bit wiser. The sun hangs low, turning the garden into a golden haze as you prepare for another task you never imagined you would learn. How medieval nuns protected their bees from predators without modern pesticides or fancy gear. You probably won't survive this day without a few stings, but so far, you've been lucky. Let's keep it that way. First up, wasps. They are like the bullies of the bee world, stealing honey, harassing workers, and causing general chaos. You watch Sister Apollonia prepare a simple wasp trap, a hollowed-out pumpkin filled with sweet beer and bits of fruit. It's basically a medieval bee mafia sting operation. Wasps enter, get drunk, and drown. Charming, right? Interestingly, this is one of the earliest examples of biological pest control. The nuns didn't have chemicals, but they had brains and patience. Historians still argue whether the pumpkin traps were widely used or just a regional curiosity, but you appreciate the cleverness. Next, the threat of bears. You chuckle. But yes, bears do raid hives. The convent's records mention the Great Bear of Ardennes, who once toppled several skeps before the nuns erected sturdy wooden fences reinforced with thorny branches. The fences doubled as deterrents and kept out curious villagers' livestock who might accidentally crush hives. You help install a fence section, feeling the sharp points prick your gloves. A strange sensation, but better than a bear's paw, you decide. Then come the cunning thieves, honey robbers among humans. Pilfering honey was frowned upon, but not unheard of. To prevent theft, the nuns marked their skeps with secret signs, subtle carvings, or painted symbols known only to the sisters. You learn to recognize these bee glyphs, little clues woven into the wood or straw. It feels like medieval cryptography. And what about the bees themselves? Predatory flies, mites, and fungal infections threatened colonies. The nuns used herbal remedies, dusting hives with powdered sulfur, smearing infested combs with garlic extracts, or even fumigating with smoke from specific plants believed to have antiseptic properties. Here is a quirky tidbit. Some convent records describe bees taking baths in shallow bowls of vinegar water to cleanse themselves of parasites. Historians still argue whether this was a real practice or a poetic metaphor for fumigation techniques. You watch the bees with newfound respect. They are tiny warriors in a medieval battlefield of wings, stings, and survival. That evening, you join the sisters in a quiet ritual, offering thanks for the day's work, the health of the hives, and the gift of honey. The chanting soothes your tired muscles, the words weaving a protective spell over you and the bees. You realize that protecting bees was as much spiritual as practical, part science, part faith. The nuns managed this delicate balance with grace, humor, and a stubborn streak you admire. And so do the bees, buzzing through the twilight like tiny, golden ghosts. The air is thick with the scent of blooming herbs as you step into the monastery's herb garden, where the secrets of medieval bee care truly begin to reveal themselves. You never thought tending bees would mean becoming a part-time herbalist, but here you are, hands dirtied by sage, thyme, and lavender, plants that do far more than just smell nice. You learn that these herbs were not just for flavor or healing the sisters themselves. They played a crucial role in calming and protecting the bees. Sister Magdalena shows you how to create a simple bee balm by crushing lavender and mixing it with beeswax. This balm was gently rubbed on hive entrances to repel wasps and soothe irritated workers. It's a little like giving the bees their own perfume, a medieval spa treatment to keep them happy and productive. You breathe in the heady mix of floral oils and wax, feeling the soft hum of nature's chemistry around you. One curious note: some convent manuscripts mention basil for bee vigor and mint to sweeten the hive air. You raise an eyebrow. Did basil really make bees more energetic? Historians still argue about whether these were symbolic or practical instructions. You suspect the truth lies somewhere in between. While you busy yourself with herb gathering, Sister Cecilia recounts tales of the night bees. These were hives placed deep in the woods, where the bees foraged by moonlight, said to produce honey with unique healing properties. The idea that bees might behave differently under moonlight feels poetic, if not scientifically proven. Your hands move rhythmically, weaving herbs into small bundles that will be hung near the hives. The sisters believe these bundles ward off evil spirits and bad weather, two threats that could ruin an entire season's work. You laugh softly at the thought. Evil spirits in a bee yard? Well, medieval life was full of such colorful beliefs, mingling superstition with observation. It kept people hopeful and vigilant. Later, you observe how smoke is infused with these herbs during hive inspections, transforming the simple smoker into a fragrant tool of peace. The bees respond differently to lavender smoke than to just dried moss. You swear you see a flicker of calm spread through the colony like a visible wave. And then there's the art of timing. The nuns observe that certain herbs were most effective at different times of the year. In spring, thyme was favored. In autumn, rosemary took the lead. This rhythm of plant and bee was a living calendar, one you have begun to understand. As dusk falls, you pause, watching bees cluster softly in the twilight. The herbal scents mingle with honey and earth, creating a sensory tapestry that feels both ancient and immediate. You realize the medieval nuns were not just beekeepers or herbalists. They were caretakers of an ecosystem, guardians of a fragile balance between nature and humanity. The bees buzz low and steady around you, as if thanking you for learning their quiet language. The chapel bells toll gently in the distance as you join the sisters for a quiet moment of reflection on the season's progress. The rhythm of the convent is a steady hum beneath the buzz of the apiary, where each day brings new lessons in patience and observation. You have learned that medieval beekeeping was not just about honey or wax. It was a profound relationship, rooted in respect and reverence. Today you focus on the art of wintering bees, ensuring the colony survives the long, harsh months when flowers sleep beneath frost and snow. Without modern heating or insulated hives, the nuns had to be both ingenious and tender. You watch as Sister Marguerite wraps skeps in thick mats made from straw and linen, carefully tucking them against the cold north winds. The insulation traps the heat generated by the clustered bees, keeping the colony snug. It is a delicate balance. Too tight, and the hive suffocates. Too loose, and the cold creeps in like a silent thief. The nuns supplemented the bees' food stores with winter candy, a mixture of honey and boiled sugar molded into cakes. These were placed strategically to feed the bees when outside foraging was impossible. You find it oddly comforting, imagining the bees nibbling on their sugary treats while the world outside sleeps. Historians still argue whether medieval beekeepers fully understood the nutritional needs of their hives in winter, or if they were guided mainly by tradition and trial and error. Either way, the nuns' methods kept colonies alive through brutal winters. You marvel at the quiet teamwork of the bees inside their protective homes, huddled together for warmth, vibrating their flight muscles to generate heat. It is a miracle of biology and faith. A quirky fact: some convent records mention bee churches, specially built structures where bees were moved during winter, often near the warmth of the convent kitchen or bakery. The warmth from bread ovens supposedly helped keep the hives cozy. You wonder if the bees appreciated the aroma of fresh bread wafting through their winter sanctuary. While wrapping the skeps, Sister Marguerite tells you about the dangers of mold and moisture, the silent killers of winter hives. The nuns hung bundles of dried herbs inside the hives to absorb excess humidity, their fragrances serving a dual purpose of pest deterrence and mold prevention. You spend the afternoon checking each hive's insulation and ensuring food stores are plentiful. The work is slow, methodical, and strangely soothing. As evening descends, you feel a growing connection, not just to the bees, but to the centuries of women who tended them, who whispered prayers over comb and wax, who worked in quiet devotion for something greater than themselves. You realize the nuns were masters of balance between nature and nurture, science and spirit, tradition and innovation. The bees' steady hum is a lullaby, a reminder that life continues, even in the coldest of times. The morning mist curls lazily around the cloister as you prepare for one of the most mysterious aspects of medieval beekeeping, the sacred rituals that surrounded the hives. You probably will not survive this without raising an eyebrow or two, but these practices offer a fascinating glimpse into how faith and folklore intertwined with everyday life. You observe Sister Agnes gathering beeswax candles for the chapel, explaining how bees and their honey were seen as divine gifts, symbols of purity and industry. In fact, bees were often linked to the Virgin Mary herself, embodying virtues of chastity and hard work. The honey, a metaphor for the sweetness of heaven. But the nuns went beyond symbolism. They conducted bee blessings or processions, where they carried hives or skeps around the convent grounds, chanting prayers and sprinkling holy water. These rituals were meant to protect the bees from evil spirits, bad weather, and disease. You find yourself wondering if the bees appreciated the attention or simply tolerated the noisy humans. Historians still argue whether these rituals had practical effects or were purely spiritual. Some suggest the processions might have coincided with seasonal hive inspections, blending work and worship seamlessly. You watch as Sister Agnes carefully carves beeswax into small devotional objects, rosaries, crosses, and tiny figures of saints. These objects were sold or given as gifts, spreading the spiritual and economic value of the bees beyond the convent walls. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some records mention bee sermons, where nuns would deliver short talks about the virtues of bees, diligence, community, and sacrifice, using the insects as moral examples. You imagine a sleepy medieval audience nodding off, or maybe taking notes for their own apiaries. Later, you participate in the lighting of the beeswax candles during evening prayers. The golden glow flickers softly, casting shadows that dance like the bees themselves. The scent of melted wax fills the air, a comforting, almost hypnotic aroma. You realize that for the nuns, beekeeping was not just an agricultural practice, but a spiritual journey. The bees were tiny saints in a fragile, buzzing cathedral built from straw and wax. The intertwining of faith and nature was a medieval specialty, a way to find meaning and control in a world that was often harsh and unpredictable. You tuck away these reflections as the bees settle for the night, their soft hum, a lullaby blending with the sisters' whispered prayers. The convent garden is alive with the buzz of bees and the rustle of parchment as you dive into the nuns' careful record keeping and the business side of medieval beekeeping. You probably won't survive this without feeling impressed at their organizational skills and maybe a little surprised by their entrepreneurial flair. You peek over Sister Juliana's shoulder as she inscribes the day's honey yield in the convent ledger, a thick book filled with neat Gothic script and occasional doodles of bees. The sisters tracked everything: hive health, honey quantities, seasonal changes, and even weather patterns. This data helped them plan future harvests and manage resources. It is impressive. The nuns were not just caretakers. They were early scientists in their own right, practicing observation and experimentation long before modern methods. One of the convent's clever innovations was bee sharing. Since individual skeps were fragile and limited, the nuns sometimes swapped hives with neighboring monasteries or lay people. This exchange helped spread stronger bee strains and reduce the risk of colony collapse. You imagine this as a medieval version of bee matchmaking. Historians still argue about the extent of such exchanges, but surviving documents show a network of bee-related communication and trade across Europe. On the economic side, honey was a valuable commodity. You learn that the nuns sold surplus honey and beeswax in local markets, often under the convent's name, a brand of sorts. Wax was especially prized for candle making, essential for churches and homes alike. The money raised helped fund the convent's needs, from food to building repairs, making beekeeping a significant part of monastic self-sufficiency. You also discover that nuns occasionally gave honey as gifts to influential figures, strengthening social and political ties. A jar of honey was more than a sweet treat. It was a gesture of goodwill and power. A quirky tidbit: some convent records mention honey stamps, small wooden seals pressed into wax seals on jars to guarantee quality and authenticity. It is basically medieval branding, centuries before corporate logos. By the afternoon, you feel a new respect for these industrious women who combined faith, science, and commerce with such finesse. Their beekeeping was a microcosm of medieval life, practical, spiritual, and social all at once. And you, sticky-fingered apprentice, are becoming part of that buzzing legacy. The morning sun filters softly through the stained glass as you return to the convent's library, a quiet sanctuary filled with the scent of aged parchment and beeswax. Here, the nuns preserved their knowledge, handwritten manuscripts, detailed drawings of hives, and even poems celebrating the humble bee. You probably will not survive this without feeling like you have stepped into a medieval TED Talk. The convent scriptorium was not just a place for copying holy texts, but also for recording practical wisdom. You leaf through a delicate vellum scroll detailing how to distinguish between queen bees and workers, a vital skill for maintaining hive health. The diagrams are surprisingly accurate, showing a level of observation that rivals modern entomology. Historians still argue about how widespread this scientific approach was among religious communities, but the convent's records prove the nuns' commitment to education and experimentation. One charming discovery: the nuns composed bee poems, short verses praising the virtues of industry, loyalty, and community found in the hive. These poems served both as teaching tools and spiritual meditation. You find yourself smiling at one that compares the queen bee to a wise abbess ruling her colony with gentle authority. You also uncover a curious recipe for bee balm, an ointment made from beeswax and medicinal herbs used to heal cuts and burns. The text describes how the balm was tested on wounds with surprising success, showing the nuns' early contributions to herbal medicine. Later, Sister Helena recites a passage from a manuscript that muses on the mystery of bee communication, those intricate dances and pheromone signals that confound even today's scientists. The text reflects a blend of awe and humble acceptance of nature's secrets. You realize that these manuscripts are more than mere records. They are a testament to the nuns' curiosity, devotion, and respect for the natural world. You tuck a small, hand-drawn bee into your satchel as a keepsake, feeling the weight of history and hope. The convent library feels alive, buzzing quietly with knowledge waiting to be rediscovered. The scent of fresh bread and herbs fills the convent kitchen as you learn about the practical daily routines that kept the bees thriving alongside monastic life. You probably will not survive this without admiring the nuns' ability to juggle demanding chores while maintaining delicate apiaries. Beekeeping was just one thread in the tapestry of convent work, woven seamlessly with baking, gardening, and caring for the sick. You help prepare a simple honey-infused bread, marveling at how the sweetness brightens the dense dough, a treat not just for taste, but also for health. Honey's role extended beyond food. It was a vital ingredient in medicinal remedies concocted by the sisters. From soothing sore throats to healing wounds, honey's antibacterial properties were well known. You watch Sister Lucille mix honey with herbs to create salves and syrups, a practice echoing through centuries. Interestingly, some convent records describe bee tea, an infusion of bee parts and flowers believed to boost stamina. You cringe a little, but appreciate the nuns' experimental spirit. Historians still argue whether these concoctions were genuinely effective or simply placebo. Meanwhile, you notice how the convent kitchen smells of beeswax from candles melting nearby, a constant reminder of the bees' contribution beyond honey. You also witness the precise timing of hive inspections, often scheduled between meals or prayer times, fitting naturally into the sisters' disciplined daily rhythm. The sisters worked without haste, but with a quiet efficiency that you envy. A quirky tidbit: the nuns sometimes used bee venom as a remedy for joint pain, carefully applying tiny stings under controlled conditions. You imagine the discomfort and determination required for such a practice. As the day winds down, you reflect on how the bees, kitchen, and chapel formed a harmonious triangle, a spiritual, practical, and communal center of convent life. You realize that medieval nuns were multitasking superheroes of their time, balancing faith, science, and daily survival with grace. The bees buzz softly outside, a constant hum beneath the convent's peaceful routine. You step into the cool shadow of the cloister, where the bees are at rest, and the convent's daily bustle has quieted to a gentle murmur. Tonight, you explore the subtle but crucial relationship between the nuns and the pests that threaten their precious hives, a world of tiny enemies and clever defenses that often went unnoticed. Varroa mites and wax moths may sound like modern pests, but medieval beekeepers faced their own set of relentless invaders. You learn how the nuns relied on keen observation and natural remedies to keep these threats at bay, long before chemical pesticides were imagined. One common tactic was the use of bee traps, small containers baited with honey and herbs to lure and capture unwanted insects. You watch Sister Beatrice prepare these traps, mixing rosemary and thyme, which not only attracted pests, but also masked the scent of the bees themselves. The convent's herb bundles and fumigation with smoldering herbs also helped ward off lice and mites. You catch a faint whiff of juniper and wormwood in the smoke. Oddly pleasant and effective, historians still argue about the effectiveness of these methods versus sheer luck or natural hive resilience. You suspect the truth includes a bit of both. A fascinating tidbit you discover: some convent records mention guardian cats kept near apiaries to catch rodents and snakes. You grin at the image of a sleek feline prowling the bee yard, protector of both bees and hives. As you carefully inspect a hive, you notice the bees' defensive behavior: low buzzing, sudden flights, and coordinated wing beats. The nuns read these signals like a language, responding calmly and quickly to protect their colonies. The fight against pests was a constant, humbling reminder of nature's challenges and the perseverance required to keep the bees alive. You feel a newfound respect for the medieval nuns' delicate balance of patience, knowledge, and intuition in this never-ending battle. Outside, the stars begin to twinkle as the bees settle down, their collective vigilance a quiet echo of the nuns' own watchfulness. The late afternoon sun casts long shadows across the monastery's apiary as you delve into the social dynamics among the bees. and how medieval nuns interpreted this bustling community. You probably will not survive this without marveling at the parallels between hive society and the convent's own way of life. You watch the bees flit from flower to flower, their choreographed dances a language of direction and discovery. The nuns called this the waggle dance, and although they could not decode it as we do today, they understood it as a vital form of communication, a lesson in teamwork and shared purpose. The queen bee, resplendent and central, was seen as a symbol of leadership and order. The nuns drew parallels between the queen's role and their abbess, ruling gently but firmly over the convent's spiritual family. Historians still argue whether medieval beekeepers grasped the full complexity of hive hierarchy, but their observations were remarkably insightful given their limited tools. You hear Sister Anne recount stories of rebel bees, swarms that challenged the queen or abandoned the hive in search of new homes. The unpredictability of these events mirrored human struggles with obedience and freedom, a metaphor not lost on the sisters. A quirky detail: some convent writings describe bees as holy creatures with a conscience, capable of recognizing kindness or cruelty. You smile at this idea, wondering if the bees knew their reputation. As you gently lift a frame, you notice the meticulous architecture of the honeycomb, hexagons built with mathematical precision. You reflect on how the nuns must have admired this natural engineering, a divine blueprint writ in wax. The hive's social harmony and tireless work ethic inspired sermons and meditations, teaching virtues of diligence, cooperation, and humility. By evening, you feel a deep connection to the bees' society, recognizing the quiet lessons hidden in their busy lives. The sisters' reverence for the hive was more than superstition. It was a profound respect for community and balance, values that echoed through the convent walls. As you close the hive gently, the bees hum their familiar song, a reminder that life, even at its smallest, is rich with meaning. The last rays of sunlight fade as you prepare to leave the convent apiary, feeling a quiet awe for the centuries of care that have shaped this delicate world. You probably will not survive this without a newfound appreciation for how medieval nuns managed to keep bees healthy, productive, and, most importantly, sting-free. You reflect on the careful balance of patience, respect, and ingenuity that defined their beekeeping. The thick wools, the slow, gentle movements, the herbal fumigations, all methods born from necessity, observation, and faith. The nuns' ability to integrate beekeeping into their daily rhythm without ever rushing or forcing is a lesson in harmony. Historians still argue about how much medieval beekeeping influenced modern practices, but there is no doubt that the foundations laid by these women were remarkable. You remember the stories of the beeswax candles lighting midnight prayers, the sweet taste of honey used in medicine and meals, and the spiritual rituals that honored these tiny creatures as gifts from God. A quirky final thought: some convents believed that if a bee stung a nun during sacred ceremonies, it was a divine message, a call to greater vigilance or prayer. You smile, imagining the mix of fear and reverence that must have stirred among the sisters. As the stars blanket the sky, you take a last deep breath of the cool evening air, filled with the faint hum of bees settling in for the night. You realize that in the medieval world, beekeeping was more than a chore or a craft. It was a form of devotion, a bridge between humanity and nature. And now, with your hands and heart full of their stories, you carry a little piece of that ancient wisdom forward. The bees sleep, and so should you. As you close your eyes tonight, let the gentle hum of the bees lull you into a peaceful calm. Imagine the soft flutter of their wings, the quiet warmth of their clustered bodies in the cold winter, and the golden glow of beeswax candles flickering in a centuries-old chapel. The medieval nuns who tended these tiny creatures were masters of patience and reverence, blending faith with keen observation in a world far different from our own. They understood that life, like a hive, thrives best with balance between work and rest, care and freedom, tradition and innovation. So let their quiet devotion remind you that sometimes the smallest things carry the greatest wisdom. Feel the weight of history soften, the buzzing fade into silence, and the world settle into a gentle rhythm. Tomorrow, you may face your own challenges, but tonight, let yourself drift, knowing you have glimpsed a timeless dance between humans and nature. The bees have done their part. Now it is time for you to rest.